redefine, human or sinful behavior, he said, go and what? Sin no more. Now, adultery is a sin. I know we call it affairs and stuff like that and stuff. It is a sin. Homosexuality is a sin. Both have dramatic repercussions, but by the grace and forgiveness and power of God, we've got to deal with it. We have to deal with it. Well, Paul, it's really interesting here. The way he sets this whole thing up, he knows by experience, personal experience here. He knows about what sin of self-righteousness is about. He knows that. He knows all about that. And so before his readers, as they're reading this there in Rome, before they get all judgmental, beginning in verse 28, he adds another list of sins that stem from this third giving over, and that's when God gave them over to a depraved mind. In verse 28, it says, and just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God any longer, God gave them over to a depraved mind to do those things which are not proper. Now, the word depraved, it means incapable of judgment or discernment. You see, what comes with a depraved mind is an ever-increasing moral and spiritual confusion. The hardening of the conscience also accompanies it. Now, who comes to your mind when you think of a depraved mind? Who comes to your mind? Any idea? This guy? A lot of people think that's who you have in mind. Hannibal Lecter. He's the best example of a depraved mind a lot of us may be thinking here. But when you look at what Paul describes here in this long list of sins, and 21 in all, by the way, he rapidly rattles off. And these sins, by the way, are revealing the slippery slide of depravity. In verses 29, he's talking about, for example, being filled with all unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, evil. What's that all about? Well, he's talking about a world where people are just out of control morally. They lost sight of what morality is. Everything is relative, that type of thing. Now, are we not there yet? I think we're there. Add to that, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, malice. They are gossips. Gossips, it says. Interesting. One of the greatest sins in the church is listed right here in this depravity list here. It's called the sin that has people talking. That's what it is, It's gossip. And that behavior comes from a deprived mind. And it says the word gossip, when you get into it, is derived from the word, interesting, whispering. Isn't that good? That's where it comes from, whispering. Carries with it the idea of divulging secrets. Envy, it says, here's another one in this list. And what that is, it's just a burning desire to have what is not yours. In verse 30, slanders, it says. Haters of God are added to that list. I don't think there has ever been a time in human history where people are more open about their hatred to God. I mean, they just can't stand them. And atheists of our day, it's one thing being an atheist, but now they're getting so aggressive. I would even say evangelistic, trying to reach people, with their particular beliefs. And their beliefs, and they go for it. They don't believe in God, and so they try to expose. God doesn't exist. God doesn't exist. God, it's crazy, but they spend all this money, all this time, all this energy into trying to expose that there is no God. It's so crazy. It's like someone trying to say, well, we're going to get a whole big committee, and we're going to put all our money to prove that there's no unicorns. But that's the zeal that's out there. The list goes on. Insolent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents. What's really interesting in that list, the idea of inventors of evil. Evil is already a list. But I try to think, inventors of evil. Well, what is that all about? I try to think, there's a lot of different things out there, especially with our internet, but I thought about this children's game. It's called Grand Theft Auto. You ever see that? Ever watch that? Shame on you. But anyway, it's the idea is these are video games where kids get to play. They got millions and millions are sold all around the world. They got, Grand Theft Auto 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's just, it's just a debased game that our kids are playing. And they're running over people. They're stealing cars. They're pimping. They're in the underworld. I mean, it's just awful, awful stuff. But the good news is this, is that character got saved on that video game. And he's on commercials now. And he's doing the opposite. He's opening car doors, and he's being nice to everybody, and it's incredible here. And he offers people Coke to drink. I'm talking about that kind of Coke. And you've probably seen that commercial. Some of you don't even know what that was all about, but that's the Grand Theft Auto guy. He got saved. I loved it. Inventors of evil. Paul closes with this last list. Without understanding, untrustworthy, unloving, unmerciful. The idea of without understanding means that the line between good and evil is gone. Untrustworthy is speaking of those who are so much into themselves that they have no loyalty to others at all. Unloving, unmerciful. If you ever wonder what kind of person who can walk into a crowd of people on a street there, innocent people, and blow them up, here it is, right here. They're unloving. They're unmerciful. And that's the list, the 21 sins there in a row. Now watch how Paul closes this off. He says in verse 32, and although they know the ordinance of God in their hearts, he's speaking about, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, they not only do the same, but also give hearty approval to those who practice them. In other words, people, they know in their hearts that what they're doing is sin. And they also intuitively know that they will reap the consequences of their sin. I mean, it's bad for them, and they know it. But instead, of stopping, they encourage other people just to jump in with them. Now, here's one thing you can count on in this world, and that is sinners love company. Have you noticed that? I mean, no one really likes to sin alone. Nobody. And if they can suck you into their sin, all the better. And many of you know that all too well. I mean, if we're honest with ourselves, we have been there and done that. Now, that's as far as we're going to get here today. But let me ask you this. Did you find yourself anywhere on that list? Did you find yourself anywhere on that list? I mean, I'm not a mind reader, but I totally believe that you will find yourself somewhere in this list of 21 sins. And God's word, what it does here in chapter 1, it catches us all one way or another. I mean, it may be greed, maybe materialism, envy, gossip, or maybe being boastful or disobedient to parents, But what the Bible does, it throws all these sins together with homosexuality, with adultery, with womanizing. And somewhere it catches us all. In other words, if you are fueled by greed, puffed up with pride, if you talk behind people's back, well, guess what, man? You're in Romans 1. That's where you are. And if you don't deal with it, man, there will be the consequences, just as there are consequences for the homosexual, the adulterer, the addict, the gossiper, and the homewrecker. There's consequences. But here's the good news here. And this is where we come full circle. Man, I tell you what, listen up. Do not miss what I'm about to say here. In fact, I'll put it up here for you. And that is, God doesn't point out our sinful condition to condemn us. But what he does, he points it out to save you and me. You know that list of sins previous to that screen right here? I'm telling you this. I was the poster boy for that list. I really was. Especially throughout my teenage years. And I turned my back to God for 20 years before someone finally had enough guts to share his faith with me and open up the Bible to me and point out just where I'm at, and my sins. And he went to Romans 1, by the way. And he went through that list.